My goddess, guys, my kitchen is officially a fucking situation. Pop-Tarts, let me put these on because this is too real. This is too real for me. I'm not the kind of person that vibes well with consensus reality. I feel violated by how real the kitchen situation is right now. This is not nice. I keep quite a large selection of decent plastic bottles in my fridge that I just refill up from the tap because we have quite good drinking water where I am, and then I just enjoy pulling a bottle of ice cold water out, and I feel like I've just stocked my fridge with ice cold mineral water. It's from the tap, you know, so I really enjoy doing that. It's really good to offer to guests as well when you have people over and you say, do you want some water? You can pass them a lovely icy cold bottle of water, and there's just something, I don't know, slightly premium about that. One may choose to say that what I'm doing right now in my kitchen is part of what constitutes adulting. I don't know when that term came into vogue, but it did enjoy a little bit of popularity, didn't it, a while ago, and now I think it's become a little bit of a staple in the language, this idea of adulting. And I like the fact that that term came into popular use, because I think in a way the fact that it gained popularity shows that we're kind of all in the same boat in a way, or a lot of us are anyway, where we feel like adulting is something that we have to give our energy to. It's something that takes energy from us. It's something that's hard. And there is kind of this sort of message that I think a lot of people swallow, or a lot of people criticise themselves with, that adulting is not hard, that you should be able to take on your responsibility. And I've come across so many people in my personal and professional life who have said things like, well, I don't deserve a cookie for, you know, getting up and washing my hair or doing my chores or paying my bills. You know, people do that all the time without expecting anything for it. So even though I find it hard, I should find it easy, and I don't deserve any props for getting it done. It's just something that I've got to do, kind of thing. And I need to just find a way of dealing with it. Whenever you come across someone in your life who tells you that you don't deserve a cookie for doing your chores or paying your bills, getting on with stuff, holding down a job, that's the kind of shit you should just do. That's part of adult life and you don't deserve any praise for it. It's just something that you should do. I would say that that's bullshit, and you should celebrate your wins. You do deserve to recognise the challenges that you've been through just during the average adult day. And you do deserve to pat yourself on the back for getting through it. And you do deserve to recognise the small triumphs of running an errand even though you had anxiety, paying your bill even though it's been really difficult to make the ends meet, making that official phone call or dealing with that official paperwork that was really freaking you out, calling up an advice line to figure out how to deal with debt. You deserve to be able to pat yourself on the back for these things. These things are amazing. Most of the people watching this video are going to have gone to some kind of school, whether it was a state school or a private school, whatever, some kind of school system. It probably hasn't escaped your memory that there really isn't that much information given to you at school about how to adult. There isn't much information given to you about how to maintain your home, how to do tasks in the home, you know, how to take care of certain things, how to take care of your bills, money management, savings, taxes, all that kind of shit. There really isn't a lot of talk about certain things that you grow up and you realise that you have to deal with. And if nobody explained those things at home, or there was a lot of shadow stuff going on around things like chores or bills at home, then school was really your only hope, and school didn't do shit for you in that regard, right? So there are a lot of people that enter adulthood with really no background in education in any of these things, and are just either kind of following what their parents showed them by example, or trying to do the polar opposite of what their parents showed them by example. So you step into the world of independence and you have no doubt got baggage and conditioning and programming that you're trying to unlearn. You've got psycho-spiritual stitching that you're trying to unpick, as well as trying to carve out your life, figure out where you want to go. You've got money to think about. You've got personal relationships to think about. You've got health and healthcare to think about. You've got all of this stuff going on. On top of that, you may also have mental health issues and other kinds of restrictions that you're facing, other kinds of challenges in your midst when it comes to adulting. I know that for me, one of the most difficult things about adulting and anything that you would put in that caliber was struggling with depression. Please don't give yourself a hard time if you find things difficult. If you find it difficult to keep on top of chores, if you find it difficult to deal with paperwork, please don't give yourself a hard time if something slips your mind, or if you've really got to go over something a few times with somebody on the phone to make sure that you completely understand it. Don't give yourself a hard time because you look to the left of you or to the right of you and you see an adult who seems to be playing the game of life so perfectly and adulting so effortlessly. Don't compare yourself to that person. That person inevitably has their own problems. That person, just like you, has their shit that they are grappling with. I can assure you of that. And even if they're at a really good point in their lives, even if they are really on the up, there's going to be times where they're down, or there might have been times before where they were down. You know, nobody has a seamless, perfect life. So please don't compare yourself to someone who seems to be better equipped to do this adulting thing than you are. Everybody has their strengths in different areas, you know. And I know that some of the places that I have my strengths as a human being are the exact places where some of the closest people to me in my life have their weakest points. But it's a vice versa thing. I can take from their strengths, and their strengths help me out because their strengths are often very sort of reflective of my weaknesses. A very, very long time ago when I was a kid, one of my family members said to me, if you're ever sitting in a room having a class or a talk, or an expert has come in to explain something, or your boss is going over something in a meeting, and there is an aspect of it that you don't understand, put your hand up and ask to have it explained again. Be brave enough to say that you don't understand it, because guaranteed there's probably at least one other person in that room who also doesn't understand and is too scared to actually say anything. Sometimes it pays to just say, I'm really sorry, I haven't quite got that, can you explain it again? And sometimes that really gives other people the permission that they may need to recognise that they're allowed to say when they don't understand something too. They're allowed to admit that they're struggling with something too, that they're finding something difficult as well. Sometimes just by admitting your weakness, just by admitting your misunderstanding, you are giving somebody else such an incredibly profound slice of permission that they might have been looking for months or even years. So don't discount the value of being honest about what it is that you find difficult. Asking for support if that support is there. You know, really just kind of brainstorming with someone else and asking them to help you to understand something. There is no time to put childish things away. That's what I really believe. There's no point in adulthood where you suddenly shouldn't do scrapbooking anymore, or painting anymore, or making a fucking blanket fort and reading some fiction inside of it anymore. Those things can be modes of survival. Those things can be the very things that we need to give us the impetus and the strength that is required to handle all this adulting stuff. It's not a case of one or the other, and that's so important to realise. It's not a case of deciding that yes, you're going to start taking this adulting thing seriously, you've got big ambitions, you've got big responsibilities, so you're not allowed to have fun anymore, you're not allowed to engage with your inner child anymore. Actually, it's almost more important that you kind of commit to giving your inner child room to play and move around and laugh and dance and do whatever your inner child wants to do. It's actually like more important that you make the commitment to allowing your inner child to have that space if you really want to level up in the adulting department, if you really feel like you want to take it to the next level. This is such a harsh world sometimes. It's such a judgmental world sometimes. It's a world where people feel they can't be authentic, they can't be themselves. And I worry that so many people who find themselves literally on the verge of suicide and find themselves either hanging around at that crossroads or actually making the decision to leave this life are the very same people who feel like they're not allowed to just be a kid. They're not allowed to just stop and just have a space for themselves where they can be silly, where they can be lazy, where they can just chill, where they can take the responsibilities off of their shoulders for a while. A lot of people think that because I have a planner and I'm into planning systems and paper planning and organising and time management and stuff like that, and that's a topic that I'm interested in, a lot of people think that means I'm really good at adulting. And I've had, you know, quite a lot of comments underneath videos where I talk about planning and stuff where people are just like, God, you're so good at the game of life, you're so good at handling responsibility, I want to grow up and be like you, kind of thing, joking about it. But actually the reason that I came to have a paper planner was because I'm shit at consensus reality. I struggle with it. You know, I've really got my head in the clouds. And that was said of me many, many times when I was growing up. It was literally like, Kelly's got her head in the clouds. Kelly's got her head in the clouds again. Oh, look, she's a million miles away. She's got her head in the clouds again. That was something that was said about me. And when I was at school, I was sent to be tested. My ears were tested because the teachers were convinced that I was hard of hearing, or maybe partially deaf, because I just didn't hear them. And they would have to literally repeat their statement 2 or 3 times, and sometimes come up to me and kind of snap their fingers in my face, because I was on another planet. I was in a trance. I was in another world. I was, as Patti Smith says, 1 foot in the street and 1 foot in the Milky Way. Except when I was a kid, I was 2 feet in the Milky Way. Fuck the street, you know. Fuck consensus reality. I was away with the fairies, you know. And I think that that's a part of me that will always be the case. I realised a while ago, as I entered my 30s, it was like late 20s, early 30s, about the age of 28, I would say, I realised that it's okay to just say, not even to admit, because I don't like the word admit, because there's no shame in it. There's no shame in realising this. But it's okay to say, and it's okay to own the fact that you're not actually really good at being in this world, and you're trying your fucking best. You know, and sometimes, some days, that's all you can do. You can't expect any more from yourself than that. There will always be people in this world who expect you to live your life by their standards, and who expect you essentially to be able to do all of the things that they can do with ease and poise and grace. And those people choose to be willfully ignorant of your specific problems, or they choose not to hear you when you try to explain why certain things are difficult for you. And you know what? That is their journey. That is their fucking journey. You cannot make somebody understand you when they already have adopted a position which tells you clearly that they have no wish to understand you. They have no wish to be able to see where you're coming from. You can't make somebody lend you their ears, darling, if they're literally not prepared to do so, and they have made that plain. The truth is that you don't have to live life by their standard, and you don't necessarily have to be good at everything that they're good at. That is a total myth. Don't let them control you that way. Don't let them have that power over you. So going back to that thing that adult told me about how you should admit when you don't understand something, you should admit that something is difficult for you, because 9 times out of 10, there's going to be somebody else in the room, in the meeting, in the class, who also doesn't really get it, but is afraid to put their hand up and admit that. I think that a really similar thing is true about this thing that I'm saying to you guys right now about adulting. I think that there are a lot of people who are trying to fake it until they make it, who are scared to admit that it is hard to be a mother, that it's hard to be an employee, that it's hard to work for a corporation, that it's hard to live in their own home, that it's hard not to be a kid anymore. I think it's really difficult for a lot of people to admit that, because they're training themselves to believe they shouldn't admit that. They're training themselves to believe there's some shame in admitting that. And I think through saying this to you, through telling you that I find it really hard sometimes to be an adult, I think there's a lot of joy in it. There's a lot of freedom in it that I didn't have when I was a kid. And I definitely don't want to go back to childhood. I do love being an adult, but my goddess, with great power comes great responsibility and great pain, I think, sometimes. You know, and I think that because there's certain parts of me that I could make more room for and more time for in childhood, and which were a lot more acceptable in childhood, which still live in me now, that's hard, because I feel like those pieces of me sometimes have to be restricted now. They have to be caged now. They can't just come out whenever. They can't just have as much space as they were able to have when I was a kid. And I didn't have an idyllic childhood by any fucking means, but I feel like when you're a kid, of course there isn't anywhere near the level of responsibility on you. You do have some level of emotional responsibility. You have a responsibility to the role that you play in the family dynamic. You may have a responsibility to a emotionally dependent parent, or to be the buffer between 2 warring parents. You know, you have sometimes a responsibility for your survival if you're raised by addicted parents, for example. I'm not saying there's no responsibility in childhood. There is. There really is. From the moment that you're old enough to be taught to adopt a persona in front of other people, you have a vast degree of responsibility on your shoulders already, just from that alone. Just from that alone, even if everything else was pretty cushy, even if everything else was okay. You have that vast amount of responsibility from young. So I'm not saying that there's no responsibility, but certainly in adulthood, we have to make the commitment as self-aware people to create space for these parts of ourselves to come through, that still need to come through, that still need to fucking live. You know, we need to give them the opportunity. We have to create that space. Nobody else is going to create that space for us. We need to make the decision that it is what is best for us to do. At this point in your life, are you a person who doesn't really make time for rejuvenation, rest, restoration, childhood things, fun things, things that are not to do with the top 3 roles that you usually play in your life on a daily basis? Are you someone who has deprioritized that? Are you someone who's told yourself that that kind of time to be you in the ways that you can't normally be you isn't really important, or you can't have that, or somebody else's needs are more important than your need to do that? Because I'm telling you now, that kind of attitude, that attitude that says other people's needs are more important, or I can't do that because I'm going to look silly, or I can't do that because so-and-so would judge me or they wouldn't understand, that attitude can only work for a certain amount of time before a person snaps, cracks, and it's not always a negative thing. Sometimes a person gets a divorce because they're just like, you know what, fuck this shit. This marriage does not make room for everything that I am. I'm done. Sometimes people move halfway around the world because they're like, you know what, fuck this shit. This place does not support me. I'm not thriving here. You know, people change careers. People do any number of positive things when they snap like that, and they know that they need to be a more holistic version of themselves. They need to allow themselves to have that space. People do all kinds of beautiful things when they snap and when they say, no, I want to be me. But people do really shitty, scary, shadowy things too. They lash out. They assault others. They bully and manipulate others. They kill themselves. They harm themselves. They walk away from their families and leave their children. They leave a note on the fridge saying, I'm sorry, I can't anymore. I've got to go. And they just fuck off somewhere and leave young children. They do all kinds of things that mean, I need to be me and I can't be me. I'm trapped, I'm scared, I'm sorry, I can't. But it's not in a conscious way. It's not in a responsible way. Tons of affairs happen for this reason, I'm sure. I came to a point in my life a long time ago where I realised that part of the reason that I self-harmed for 7 years was because I wasn't really letting myself be me. I didn't really understand who me was at that age, but I definitely was being inauthentic, and I definitely was holding on to this image of who I thought I had to be, and that wasn't helping matters. And I realised that I had to just let myself be who the fuck I am, even if that means sometimes alienating people, even if it means sometimes people think I'm irresponsible. When you decide that you've got to be who the fuck you are, you can no longer lose sleep over other people's opinions. You can no longer afford to worry about what everybody and their dog are thinking about that. You have to just do it. You have to just do it. And not everyone is going to understand that. Seriously, a family member said to my mum once that they felt like I didn't have any children because I just wanted to be on Planet Maddox all the time, and I just wanted to be in a world of my own, and that's probably why I didn't have any kids. And my mum relayed this to me, and I was like, yeah? And fucking what? And fucking what? Maybe that's what I want to do. Maybe that's who I am. Maybe that's who the fuck I am. And you might be someone watching this who does have kids and who's been judged for, you know, doing things that somebody else considers to be childish. You know, oh, they should put that away now. They've got kids now. They shouldn't be focusing on that dream or that ambition or that activity. They've got children to think about. Don't you let anyone take something from you that keeps you alive and fuels you and helps you to be the best parent you can be. If you know that without those things, you would actually be a shitty parent because you wouldn't be fulfilling yourself, you wouldn't be filling up your tank, you do those things and fuck those people. Never mind their judgments. Never mind their judgments. You've got to do what you've got to do in this life to make sure you don't break in one of those bad ways I was chatting about earlier. I know bad is a really subjective term, but you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying. Realising that you have a responsibility to fight for your own peace of mind and your own happiness in this world is a very difficult thing. that realization is not hearts and flowers. It's not hearts and flowers at all. It's a hard thing to realize, because it might mean that you're going to piss some people off. It might mean that you are no longer going to be prepared to be who they want you to be. It might mean that you have to throw the script on the ground and stop reading your fucking lines, and that is going to piss some other people off who are very much dedicated to the theatrical production, and they don't want you to stop reading your lines. Don't tell yourself that it's a choice between making yourself happy and making other people happy. Don't tell yourself that it's a choice between responsibility to yourself or responsibility to others. You can be a conscientious person who is of service in the world and still know that you're not prepared to sacrifice your peace of mind, and you're not prepared to abandon your passion. You can know both of those things. Both of those things can happen simultaneously. If you are duty bound, if you are familial, if you have people that you take care of, if you have people that you love, if you want to be involved in your community, if you want to strive to help the planet, all of those things are beautiful. None of those things need to be done at the expense of you and your soul. I promise you that now. And I feel like too many people who are spiritual have this idea that if they want to help themselves and be happy within themselves and fulfill themselves and go on their spiritual journey, it means they have to leave the world behind. It means they have to stop watching the news. It means they have to shut themselves off from anything going on that scares them. And actually, that's not the case at all. Those who are carers, who are activists, who are trying to get something fucking done, those people are among the most vulnerable and at risk if they are not prepared to help themselves to thrive, if they're not prepared to give their inner child some kind of an outlet, some way to express itself. You can't afford to let your ego get the better of you. Your ego sometimes is going to want you to pretend that you're okay to fucking soldier on up the mountain, when actually the reality is that you need a break. That you're okay to take on an endless amount of responsibility, when actually you could do with delegating, you could do with some fucking help. The truth is that sometimes there will be individuals in your midst who will almost rely on the fact that your ego is set up that way, because they need your ego to be set up that way so that they can lean on you, rely on you, take advantage of you, manipulate you even in some cases. So it takes really a lot of strength to defy your ego and the way that it might be programmed to force you to soldier on when you can't, or to force you to take on responsibilities or say yes to social events when you don't want to. You know, it takes a lot to defy that egoic training and say, no, I can't, I need to take time for me, or no, I don't really enjoy that, or no, there's no way it can be finished by this deadline, it's not possible. Your ego will also tell you to put childish things away. Your ego may sometimes tell you that it's time for you to give up on the things that bring you joy, or that you shouldn't spend your free time doing certain kinds of things because it's immature, it's a waste of time, or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you know that your soul needs it, then listen to that. Listen to that voice from inside. A lot of people struggle big time with self-surveillance. Self-surveillance is just basically your awareness of what other people might be thinking or feeling about you. So you're thinking over time usually about the way that you're being perceived by another person, what they think of your choices, what they think of the way that you look. And I know, because I struggle with self-surveillance, and I think it's a leftover in a lot of ways from the time when I had my eating disorder, because I've never really fully been able to shake it since then. And for me, it's mostly to do with how people view me physically. But there's so many different ways that it can seep in and kind of poison the water. And sometimes I think that self-surveillance can be such an insidious thing when we're trying to take the power back in our lives. We're trying to allow ourselves to have fun, or go off in pursuit of our goals, or live our life in a way that might not necessarily be socially normative. And suddenly we are in self-surveillance mode. Suddenly we are thinking, well, what will other people think about this, and how will I be perceived, and maybe so-and-so will think I'm immature, or maybe those people will talk about me. And then we end up not actually putting our best foot forward and doing what we need to do for ourselves, and I think that's really sad. Every time I do a video of this nature where I'm talking about how you should, you know, do more of what you are passionate about and let yourself have the things that make you happy, etc., I inevitably get at least one comment which is something like, What if you know that you need to actually get on with stuff and you actually need to do some adulting, but you're putting it off by convincing yourself that the self-loving thing would be to stay in bed all day and watch Netflix, you know, or the self-loving thing would be to do some colouring. Like, what if literally you know that you need to take responsibility and you are avoiding it? What then? What happens when it's the other way round and you actually need to take responsibility rather than ceasing responsibility? And to those people, I will say, if you know in your heart of hearts that you've got shit you need to deal with and you need to tough love your way through it, darling, you've already won half the battle. Because to see yourself in that position, knowing that you are wrapping yourself up in blankets and plugging your ears and pretending not to see or hear the things that you need to be dealing with, knowing that you're doing that is half the battle. Knowing that you're doing that is something that is very hard to bring to consciousness. That awareness that you are shrouding yourself and, you know, ignoring and being conveniently selectively forgetful. If you know that's what you're doing, then you're already halfway to solving it. If you need to take responsibility and you know that you need to take responsibility and you haven't been and you're aware that it's becoming a problem, then you are already exhibiting quite enough strength to be able to take the first step to do what you've got to do, because it takes strength to see yourself in that kind of negative cycle and agree with yourself that you're going to bring yourself out of it. If you're avoiding stuff, if you're putting stuff off, if you know there's things that you really need to get to and you've been telling yourself, I just need to have a nap, I just need to do this, I just need to, you know, and you're basically dancing around it and you're not nipping it in the bud, you've got to get really clear on why you want to do it. And there's going to be layers to your reasoning for why you want to do it. You're going to want to do it because you're anxious about it in the back of your mind all the time and you want it gone, you want it out of the way so you can free up more headspace for other things. You're going to want to do it as a mark of self-respect and self-love, to show yourself that you will do these things for yourself, to give yourself peace of mind and to show yourself your strength and your tenacity. There could be other reasons. You know, I know that when I'm putting something off that I really, like, it's a bullet that I don't want to bite, it's a shit sandwich that I really don't want to eat, I know that my reasoning has a lot to do with showing myself that I can, that I have reached a point where I really can take that tentative first step, even if the first step is just to ask for help. When I was in my mid-20s and I knew that I needed to deal with my debt, I asked for help. I asked somebody to come round and sit with me while I opened up all those red letters, and I have done that since, professionally and personally, for people. There is nothing wrong with that being the first step, honey bunnies. There's nothing wrong with saying to someone, I need to get my shit in order, can you come round and just sit with me while I do it? Can you come round and sit with me while I declutter? Can you just tell me it's all going to be okay? And if you don't have anyone to do that for you, I'm telling you right now, it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. You are going to show yourself that you can. And that is such a beautiful thing to do for yourself, self-love wise. Self-love wise, it's huge. A lot of people, I think, want to skip over the discussion about tough love being an important form of self-love. I think it's easier sometimes to talk about making a blanket fort and colouring, or, you know, just taking time for yourself and relaxing your body and trying new things, learning new things. You know, it's easier to talk about those things sometimes than it is to talk about biting the bullet, eating the shit sandwich, really doing what you've got to do for yourself in ways that are not pleasant but are going to make you feel so much better afterwards. It's harder to have those discussions, and it's harder to have those discussions with yourself, never mind as a community talking about self-love as a concept. It's hard to have those discussions with yourself. I didn't go to a dentist for the best part of a decade because I was shit scared, because after my eating disorder I knew my teeth had deteriorated. I had a tooth here in the back that was slowly falling apart. Little bit by little bit would chip off every now and again. I was convinced, absolutely convinced, that if I went to the dentist it would not be good news, and I put it off for years out of fear. So I know what it's like to dance around something that you've got to do, to dance around a bullet that just needs to be bitten. Even if the news was bad when I went to the dentist for the first time, which it wasn't, I needed an extraction of the broken tooth, but they did agree that I could go to hospital for that and actually be put under for it. So I didn't really see that as bad news, despite having a massive dental phobia. But even if the news was bad, in the end, it was so heavy on my heart, I knew I would rather know. I knew I'd reached a point where it was more self-loving to just fucking know if I needed 5 teeth out. To just know if, you know, if it was something, you know, if my gums were deteriorating or whatever. Just to know would have been better. And I have definitely experienced situations where the outcome wasn't as good as I'd hoped for, you know? And in the end, afterwards, I'm glad that I knew. I'm glad that I bit that bullet and I just found out, because it's only once you've found out where the land lies that you can deal with the fucking situation. You can't deal with it when you're blindfolded from it. You can't deal with it when you've shrouded yourself in blankets and you're trying really, really hard to convince yourself that that problem doesn't exist. Going to the dentist again was partly about realising that it wasn't self-loving to talk about self-love on YouTube and to honour how far I'd come with it and still be avoiding this massive thing that I had to do for myself. I realised that I'd come to a point where I could just about handle it, and I was terrified. My phobia was real, guys. My goddess, it was so intense. I would really wake up in a cold sweat dreaming about the fucking dentist. It was about wanting to let myself be free. It was about realising that that was, for me, the next stage of self-love. It was an evolution. It was a progression. A lot of people that have realised that they are shrouding themselves in self-love activities as a way to distract themselves from the responsibilities that they're ignoring are really already coming to the point of realisation that that can't continue. If you are able to voice to somebody that that's what you're doing, then you've already gone past the point of no return with dealing with it. You are already on your way to dealing with it, I think, through becoming conscious of it. But the reason that you haven't dealt with it yet, or at least part of the reason that you haven't dealt with it yet, is because it feels a little bit like being in a nice warm cottage with a log fire burning, with the softest blanket around you that you'll ever have, with fairy lights and all your favourite books and a big cup of hot chocolate. And you have to take yourself out of that environment, put on a raincoat and go out into a raging storm, which with like freezing cold sideways rain. That's what it feels like when you're using your self-love activities as a form of distraction and you've actually got to do what you've got to fucking do. And when I think about the dentist thing, that is what it felt like in hindsight. It felt like my denial was rotten. There was something maggoty about it, because even though I presented this pristine image that everything was fine and I was on this amazing self-love journey and everything, there was something rotting somewhere, you know? It's like being in a house and knowing there's something rotting and you're not dealing with it. And I've had dreams like that before when I'm trying to avoid something. I have dreams that there's an infestation in a cupboard and I'm just not dealing with it, and I'm seeing guests and I'm just going about my business, entertaining everyone, making sure everybody's glass is filled, and there's actually like flies breaking out in the cupboard. And I know exactly what that's about because it's so fucking obvious, right? It's about denial. It's about pretending, putting on a front, pretending everything's okay, but you know in the back of your mind there's something you've got to deal with. So there's something a little bit maggoty about it, as I like to say. Like, the denial is warm, it's comfy, it is that log cabin with that lovely log fire and that blanket, but there's something dark about it, and you know that. You know that your place is out there in the storm, somehow, kind of showing yourself what you're fucking made of. And that's why it's hard. That's why, even though people sometimes have the realization that they're denying their responsibility, it still takes them a while to actually do something about it. And I definitely think that you could stand to think of it like that, right? So just kind of remind yourself that that's what's happening. If you really are struggling and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to bite this bullet, then just think to yourself, I need to get a raincoat on and I need to go out into the storm. That's my role. That's where I'm headed. That's what I need to do for myself now. And just really talk to yourself about why that's what you've got to do. Because really, when you confirm for yourself why that's so important, it's harder and harder to ignore the importance of it. I want you to feel that sweet relief. I want you to get to the end of this challenge, this shit sandwich, if you will, and take a deep breath and just go, thank fuck I finally dealt with that. Thank fuck I actually got it together to do that. I really needed that. And I love myself. And this is a way in which I've proved to myself that I do love myself. And remember, the first step might not be the whole animal. The first step might just be saying it out loud to somebody, writing it down, just saying, this is happening and I know I need to deal and I'm not dealing and it's not good and I intend to deal. You know, if it's really at its inception, maybe that's what you need to do. Or maybe you know that you are headed towards actually the first concrete step, and do it today, do it tomorrow, make this week the week that you do it. Maybe it's a phone call that you need to make, maybe it's an email that you need to read. If there's something on your to-do list that seems quite kind of innocuous, that doesn't seem like it's really something you should be afraid of, but you keep putting it off, you keep crossing other things off and you're not doing that one thing, definitely shadow work why that might be. I've had a few things on my to-do list in my head for nearly a fucking year now, and I have actually started to really shadow work, like, why can't I just do these things? They would take less than a day to do. What is the problem here? Sometimes something just seems like so easy to address, so simple to do, and I do catch myself criticizing myself for not doing it and thinking, for God's sake, just get that done. But eventually I look at it and go, hang on, is there something shadowy here? And you know, invariably there is. If something could be done in an hour, or I could schedule it into a day and I'm not doing it, it's because there's something behind it, there's something shadowy there that I'm afraid of. I'm linking it to something deeper down in the psyche that feels more insidious to me than just the act itself. If you don't know why you're not doing something, shadow work it. If you don't know why you can't seem to kind of take an action that seems so innocent and so harmless and like it should be so easy, shadow work it. Because I guarantee you, this thing that you're putting off is a symbol of something else. And it's that something else that's causing the problem. Remember what I said towards the beginning as well. If somebody's giving you a hard time for something that you are struggling to deal with, if somebody's making you feel small because they would find it really easy to do this thing that you're finding so difficult, you've got to drown those people out, whether you just do it psychologically or whether you actually just stop answering the phone to them, just stop spending time in their company. Whatever you have got to do to make that into a reality, because you don't need that. That's not going to help you get where you want to go. It's certainly not going to help you get where you want to go self-lovingly. It might help you get where you want to go if you want to berate yourself and mock yourself and criticize yourself to high heaven and do untold damage to the journey of self-love you've been on so far. Yeah, then absolutely take advice from those people who are criticizing you and demeaning you for finding it difficult to do something. But frankly, if you've blessed someone in your life with that information about you, that you're finding something difficult and all they've got for you is criticism, and it's almost like they're enjoying it because it's making them feel big, you don't need that kind of energy around you. You don't need that kind of energy anywhere near you. It's sad though, isn't it? Because people often do that because of their perceived ideas from their ego of what they need to be portraying. People do that because it feels temporarily good in some empty way to feed off of somebody else's admission of failure or fear, somebody else's admission that they need help. It feels good sometimes for a person to feed off of that and criticize that and make it seem other to them so they can feel like they are strong and they are okay. Quite often when somebody mocks somebody else's difficulty that they're having with something, especially to do with adulting, it's because they themselves need to take a load off. They themselves are probably pushing themselves too hard, too far in some way. They themselves are trying to hide behind a mask of what they think their family or their friends or society wants them to be, and that's why they lash out and they feed on another person's admission of fear. They feed on that vulnerability that that person has given them in admitting that they need assistance or they're scared of doing something. If you've ever been mocked or criticized by someone for admitting weakness or failure or inability, you know, or fear of doing something, you probably can see how that came from a deep insecurity within them. Their cruel response to your request for assistance or understanding was a result of their deep insecurity and their inability to be vulnerable with you in return. Darlings, I've prattled on for quite long enough. I do hope this has provided some inspiration or just something to listen to while you do the dishes. If you're hate watching, I hope it's provided something good for you to hate watch. And whatever it's provided you with, I hope it's been nurturing and nourishing and all that good shizzle. I am now going to do the last 5 items. And then I'm going to wait for my bestie to come over. He's making me a vegan omelette, which is just going to be glorious. I'm very excited. It's made with gram flour, which is chickpea flour. And we're having it with spinach and mushroom and vegan sour cream. And I'm fucking stoked. I cannot wait. It is going to be gorgeous. We have actually made it for each other a few times, and it's always been amazing. But yeah, I'm really excited about tonight. We're going to have it with some wine. It's just going to be lovely. So I'm going to go and do that. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for returning to my channel and spending some time with me. I really do appreciate it so much. It means a lot to me. I really appreciate the interaction. I appreciate the interactions that you have with each other. I appreciate your energy. I appreciate your insight. And I hope that you can feel that I do. If you want to work with me, if you want to book a reading, if you want to book a session, if anything in this particular housework ramble has shaken something up inside of you and you want to chat with me about it over a cup of cha, darling, of course, then go over onto the online store. I'll leave the link in the down bar. You can check out everything that I offer. I do counselling, I do mentoring, I do tarot mentoring, business mentoring, I do readings. Check it out and come and work with me if you feel called to do so. So much love, darlings, and self-love. Blessed be. Mwah!